Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Making Like Two Humans Being. I'm Julie here. With me, as always, it's the wonderful and fabulous Kate Fago. And today we're both feeling a little introspective. Yeah. I was going to say mad. I was going to say uninspired. And then I was like, I may be introspective. We're both kind of, can I say it this way, Kate? We're both kind of beating ourselves up for things that are absolutely out of our control, not our fault, have nothing to do with us, and yet being the humans, and I would also say female humans that we are, we tend to believe it's all our fault. And so we're stuck. So we were just trying to think of, actually, I have to say this too though, Kate, there's a book coming in the mail for me today called On Our Best Behavior, which was all about female and how we were taught up against the 7 deadly sins. I can't wait for this book, but we'll talk about it when I get that far. But I just have to tell you.
Oh, that sounds painful.
Oh, I know.
As you know, I'm doing this course in fembodiment. I love Eva, I really do. And because I'm feeling a bit meh in general, I'm a bit like, can't really be bothered to go on a call, because much though I love her, she you know, that she's always late, like as in the class will go on, you know, it's great, but it's like it was supposed to be an hour and 15 minutes and it'll be an hour and 45 minutes, you know, it's 10 15 20 half an hour, you know, and you can leave, but you don't want to, because you don't want to miss stuff. So it's like, can I really be bothered sitting through this? And yet every time I'm just like, oh my god, blown away. But there's a lot of the wounded feminine, and just in culture in general, how the feminine has been suppressed. So yes, I look forward to. So explain that again. It's about what in the context of the 7 deadly sins?
It's about women and how we've been taught to behave. And I'm trying to think of this in broad strokes, and it's by Elise Lunan, who's my favorite podcaster right now. And she talks about women's behavior and the cultural norms that have been put in place to keep us where we are in the framework and context of the 7 deadly sins.
That's it. And that's how, because you know, with the feminine, that you always talk about the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and you know, I sort of think I know vaguely what it means, but I don't really. So I actually had to download, and again in this course I'm doing, there is all this reference to the masculine and the feminine. I'm like, well, other than the obvious, do I really understand what they are? So I downloaded this off the internet, which is actually very good. But for those of you like me who sort of know but don't really, there's a lot of references to the masculine being all about structure and that. So you know, we've talked a lot past about how so it comes in to structure, that logical progression, all everything's measured against things, all value based, all of that, and that's the structure that the masculine provides, and the feminine is all about the nurturing, the emotions, the feelings, and all of that. And just society in general is obviously very masculine at the moment, as in everything's very structural. I know, looking at it myself from a very early age, I've always been very masculine energy, and as I was told at the time, that I didn't understand it at the time. Sorry, I sort of jumped straight into a subject.
You did, which is what we thought might happen. We had it, but we're going to do this now. This is great.
Well, no, we'll get there, because I had a whole list of stuff to talk about, and I had an incident this morning, as I was saying, Julie, first thing in the morning, I had an incident where I had a gut reaction to an emotion, because of this course I'm doing with Eva Baronius. I was trying to feel into it and that, so I'm just like exhausted, because we both have these reactions. We both know enough to know that it's okay to have these reactions, but it doesn't stop you jumping on the bandwagon with being really disappointed with yourself for having a reaction, and then disappointed that you're disappointed in yourself because you know better than being disappointed in yourself, and you're supposed to be being supportive. And this is all the feminine, and the feminine has been totally suppressed in all of us, not to show our emotions. Don't be so sensitive, don't moan about things, don't express your feelings. And this is have a feeling is what you're going to go through in your book. But that has been supported culturally as well. And then of course both of us have been through corporate worlds where everything is in a masculine structure, and if you showed any emotional feeling or made a fuss or a noise about that, then you're irrational, and which is all the immature feminine. You're irrational, you're manipulative, you're emotional, you're mad, you have once a month you go fucking crazy, and all of that, like mad crazy old woman. God, the more I think about crazy old women, the more I just identify with being a crazy old woman. Fuck you, I'm a crazy old woman. But so I'm just feeling a bit deflated. What was I talking about?
You were talking about, you printed that thing off about the divine feminine because you weren't certain everybody understood what, I think you were going to explain divine feminine and masculine. There has to be.
I know, but in what context? I was going somewhere with it. Just doing this.
I'm going to say this about that is that, yes, we are female in this incarnation. The divine feminine is actually, to some, I guess, without a better definition, is like higher than that. And every one of us human incarnations needs to have a balance of divine feminine and divine masculine. And what we're seeing in society as a whole is this has been absolutely imbalanced for centuries, which is why we're starting to see so many of these systems start to get pulled up into the light, reviewed, and to some degree falling, hopefully, because we're trying to get that balance back. This disconnection from nature is an example of this imbalance in the divine feminine, divine masculine. So
and every person has masculine and feminine in them. This is not about gender, this is not about sex, this is not about sexuality, this is not about whatever else, whatever word. I'm never really sure what the difference is between all of them. But I remember years and years and years and years ago they did studies on the men versus women, that old argument, and it was what they considered male and female brains, and men that went into what was traditionally female roles, such as a care sector, and females that went into what was predominantly male roles, such as engineering, actually had male brains and what they deemed male brains, and likewise the men who go into caring professions tend to have female brains. So it's actually irrespective of gender. It's actually how we're built. And just so this is the mature masculine. Holds space, is present, grounded, clarity, guidance, witness without judgment, creating safety, emotional sensitivity. Okay, they're not, not all of them as well known, but it's about leadership, being dynamic, being purposeful, powerful, confident. The immature masculine, on the other hand, is competitive, controlling, aggressive, macho, arrogant, everything. So when we talk about toxic masculinity, that's the immature masculine.
I love this. I've not heard this broken down from the mature and immature. This is super helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'd send you the link if I knew where I got it from. I can send you the PDF. I can't remember the link.
Thank you.
But okay, so in summary, so mature feminine is unconditional love, being intuitive. Sorry, this is annoying because they're not all written in the same, they're not all like nouns. Some of them are nouns and some of them are adjectives. That's the sort of thing I'd have to tear apart and rewrite because of my masculine energy. That's my masculine energy because I like form and clarity, right? I need to be articulate. That's masculine. Unconditional love, being intuitive, creative, grace, freedom, compassionate, patient, surrendering, feeling, nurturing, blah, 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 blah. Softness, trusting, allowing. Immature feminine is needing external validation. It's superficial, manipulative, vindictive, possessive, seductive, victim, jealous, needy, insecure, etc., etc. So I have absolutely no idea where I was going with all of that, Julie.
We were talking about that book. So I think just to explain, there's varying degrees of divine feminine, divine masculine. I don't want to say varying degrees because that's not, there's divine feminine, there's divine masculine. I like this breakdown because it also kind of leads into the soul age that we did in book club with Ainslie Macleod's book, The Instruction, and then the Old Souls Guidebook, where it talks about.
Yes, because we come back as different genders each, whenever, because this is also sort of like yin and yang, and like you talk about the but that's yin and yang as well. It's like the masculine and feminine are supposed to balance each other, and if you don't have the mature masculine is supposed to support the mature feminine and vice versa. And yes, you tend to have, as a woman, you tend to have more of those qualities, and as a man you may have more of the other qualities. And it's quite interesting, though, to me at least, would love a wider discussion with someone that actually knew something and could contribute to it, not suggesting you don't. I don't think you know the answer to this. It's like, you know, a lot of gay men, for example, go into caring professions. So like, why would having more of the feminine energies make you homosexual? Is that true? Do you know? It's like, how do the two things link? You know, because to say that someone has these qualities, therefore they're more like a woman, therefore they like a man, you know, that just seems too basic to me. There must be more to it than that, and that I don't. It's very interesting. Did read something very sorry, got verbal diarrhea now. Obviously I haven't spoken to anyone today. With was I read somewhere, it was Abraham Hicks was talking about, some people saying, you know, with all this, there's a lot of, I don't know about you, but a lot of my friends at Swimming and I are talking about all this. There's a lot of talk about gender because they tried to bring in the new laws in Scotland, and England has refused to allow Scotland to bring in laws, and this was about being able to change your gender officially. But there's been a huge outcry about it all. It's all, I think, a pile of nonsense, because technically it's all about a piece of paper. It's not about whether someone is allowed to live as a woman or not. You can't actually stop somebody doing that. This was actually about the legal piece of paper. But of course, all the, I'm going to call them fascists, are up in arms about, you can't have a man. They managed to get a story about a man who managed to get into, a man who'd been convicted of rape, got into women's prison because he was identifying as a woman, you know, and they've taken this extreme as an example, you know, like, oh dear God, there was 100 mistakes made for that to happen before it became about whether or not, you know, it's like, but I don't even want to, but people are talking about this a lot, and I am not educated enough to discuss it. I also, it's a difficult subject because people get really het up about it. I don't really understand why. You're not taking anything away from me. You know, if someone wants to become a woman, be my guest, you'll find it's not a bag of roses. Have a go. Like, you know, it's like, I learned that ages ago. Like, what's it taking away from me? Why do people get so judgmental about it? What do you care if somebody wants to become a woman, or a woman wants to become what's it taking off your plate? Nothing.
No.
So I don't understand. Anyway, Abraham Hicks,
just let people be. Whatever happened, letting people be. So anyway,
but one of the things that have come up with Abraham Hicks had mentioned about, I can't remember the question was, but it's like, why do people choose to come and be gay? Oh, I think she was using it as an example, how some people want that on their soul's journey, have chosen particular paths to make things, you know, how we make things difficult for ourselves because we want a challenge, apparently, having, you know, naively as we bounce down to earth going, yay, let's have a challenge. And so same is true of people who have disabilities. You know, we go, why would you choose to come on this earth and have a disability? And it's because it puts you in a different box that nobody can argue with. Nobody can make you go to work. You know, you are in a different society. The society's expectations on you are different. Like, you know, if you are severely mentally or physically disabled and are unable to work, your value in your life and the choices that are open to you and what other people can expect of you are completely different. And, you know, you're like, oh, wow, that's a fascinating way to look at it. And she said, likewise, Abraham said, likewise, when people come through as gay, because it's not something you can suppress forever. So you may try to go along with society's norms, but at some point you actually have to acknowledge your soul and what your soul wants inside. And this is all part of a journey for someone else. Isn't that fascinating? So, and you know, so to think that actually coming here, you know, as gay or in transgender or whatever like that, you've actually chosen to be different for a reason, you know, to push yourself into a situation where you're gonna have to challenge stuff. I just thought that was fascinating.
yeah.
And
Yes,
I've gone completely off topic.
Yeah. And we could continue this conversation too. Yeah, it's interesting to me from a soul perspective, from a soul perspective, and even looking backwards into time, you see more acceptance of gay marriage or gay couples taking care of children, or right now the conversation is around trans people, transgender people, and acceptance and around, and how can we, it's not even, I don't even understand why there's a question of how can we just accept them as I'm like, I don't understand what the problem is. It's interesting that we're having this conversation now, not you and I, but it's broader conversation that this is happening. To me, this is as painful as it is. And it's frustrating, like for me to watch this and think everybody's human, like love everybody, just let it be. Like I have it even within my own family where they begin to, get down on trans people too. And I'm just like, what does it matter? It's for the same reasons that you said. It's this from a soul level to choose that, to sign up for that life, for that incarnation and that type of a thing. I mean, we signed up for our lives for different reasons and to learn different things. This exact same thing is true here. And there's even, to me, like an added thing about opening up the conversation and trying like to be to some degree like the pointy end of the spear. Like to me, part of the reason why we're here is to normalize, if we have to, I guess, in the society that we're in, to normalize being intuitive, because that is actually a divine feminine quality, is intuitiveness. And how can we make it, everybody's capable of doing it. How do we have our own little, like, you know how I say piece of pie, like that's our little piece of pie. And there's part of, I'm not saying that every trans person is like, you must change the world. That's not my point. It's just more that this is a good conversation to have, because it just shows acceptance. And I think if I'm not mistaken, metaphysically, there's conversations about how, as divine beings having a human experience, our goal here is to move the human experience to more of what people will say is utopia. Everybody gets along, everybody's accepted. We're just having to go through this earth school it's really super painful. And so that's on a soul level, that's part of what's happening, which is interesting when you take a step back and kind of watch it unfold that way. It's not going to possibly be resolved in our lifetime, but it is.
I would like to know how far, if to go back, maybe you'd know this because you know, I consider you very intellectual, Julie. Did you say thank you?
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. You said it almost apologetic. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Own it. You know, when I have these little books somewhere, not here, and one of them was about, I think it's called feminism, but it sort of went, it went back through history, but like a lot of the old African tribes, I don't know how far back we're going, and my history is shit, just to put it out there, but there used to be matriarchal societies, and it's I don't know if they still call it, but this sort of masculine lifestyle is quite recent history, the sort of industrial revolution and all of this side of it, so it's quite recent. So I would be really interested to know that further back in time, when perhaps there was more of a matriarchy and stuff like that, where focus was on feeling and intuition and connection with nature and source and love and all those things, how homosexuals were treated in those days, for example. It'd be just interesting to see, because we just assume that in ye olden days everyone was less tolerant, but it's like, but then go further back, because it is quite interesting, because we just assume that women have been suppressed forever, but not true.
No.
True.
No, and I was reading Native American history, and so a couple things that you said in Native American history before Caucasian, and I point to me, before white people came and did all the horrendous things to break down their culture that we did, and still do. It's not stopped. It's just taken different shapes, if that, anyway. But in the past, their cultures were much more aligned and equal in the divine feminine, divine masculine. Feminine roles had important things, and they were both respected. Both areas were respected, instead of this masculine being more important and therefore suppressing feminine, as is found in most Western cultures. In Native American cultures, it was actually far more balanced, and that's how they thrived, as well as how they were integrated with nature, and everything thrived. And then you see us come along, us being white people come along, and we to some degree, we annihilate all of them. We annihilate the buffalo. We annihilate all these trees to the point where we can't even feed ourselves. That's what to me is super interesting. So, and the other thing with in Native American cultures, from what I've read so far, trans people were accepted and to some degree revered as two spirits.
Two winds, was it? They're not called two spirits or two winds or something. There was one of the queens on I can't remember which one of RuPaul's Drag Race. She was Native American, and she had a name. She had like a name that was reflected that.
Yeah, yeah, and they're very special people because they are able to have both, right? And it's just it's to me sometimes, like, I think right now I'm in kind of like an overwhelm, oh my God, we're never going to make it kind of a feeling, because I'm reading a book about, I'm reading The Overstory from Richard Powers, which is a fictional account, won the Pulitzer Prize here, and one of the characters is based on Suzanne Simard, who wrote Finding the Mother Tree, and you just see like the destruction. And I just read an Ojibwe story told through wolves about humans and how they came to be, and then the new humans come, which are the white people, and what all happens to natives. And I'm just like, oh, we're not, how are we ever going to learn? As I when I look at the news, which isn't all that often, and I see all this conversation, particularly right now about the debt ceiling, I'm just like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Or like,
oh, it's nonsense. It's just a piece of paper. Fucking nothing.
I know.
Not even a piece of paper, it's a digital readout somewhere.
Absolutely.
You know, Abraham Hicks says is like that everything in our world is so skewed in terms of the media because that's what sells and that's what people want to read about, although it's not what people want to read about. I actually joined Audible again because a lot of the books I had when I was commuting, I bought purely because they were 13, 14, 15 hours long, and they tended to be really serious or really, really sad or really, really tragic. And there's some miserable books in there. I mean, they are lovely, but so, I was like, I don't want to read any more of this stuff. I want something uplifting. I actually joined Audible again and Googled uplifting books, and I got this book, and it is great, but I fucking cried, and everyone at swimming's going, why are you reading this book? Because it was about a woman that was dying and a girl that was dying to meet in hospital and have this friendship, and it goes through, they were going to do 100 years because between them their ages were 100, and it was very heartwarming, but it was still, and I was like, for fuck's sake, I want to read something happy but doesn't sell. And Abraham Hicks was saying, like, there are people that come and they go, I want to do like uplifting artwork, or I want to write uplifting music, but there's no, you can't, there's no market for it. Or their answer is there is, it's maybe not the same market. But what she said was, if you were watching television 24 hours non-stop of the whole existence of the world, and you imagine that crammed into your 24 hours, you can zzz across the TV screen, and then for one blip across the screen, that's lack of well-being. All the rest is well-being. The bad stuff that happens in the world is so tiny in comparison to the flow of well-being that is always on. It's just that humans focus on it. Of all the magnificent things that are happening every minute of every day, of love, of creation, of beauty, of joy, of friendship, and all these things. But it would literally be a blip across your screen that quick if you measured it all up together, and that was it.
It's crazy. There's two references. There was Elise Lunan just interviewed a gentleman who was talking about relationships, so relationships was the topic of his new book. I don't remember, and I'd have to go look it up. But he was saying that human beings are programmed to, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically to focus on the negative and to worry and to create these stories that keep us trapped in this feeling of hopelessness, despair, and whatnot. And then that even was in the Overstory too. He quoted somebody saying that
but they say programs, but they make it sound like that's irreversible. And it's not. We're programmed because that's what our parents do. It's not because nature, and at the time when you were waiting for the fox, or we have foxes, there is that immediate danger. And yes, of course, as as we grew in intelligence, you'd like to look to predict danger so that you can avoid it. But this incessant stuff that we do, we learned that. We learn that from our parents. We learn that from our society. We learn it from the media. We learn it from everybody around us.
Yeah.
And that can be changed.
I agree. And I do believe that is why we're here as human beings, to work on changing it. Because
you hear that, people? Stop it.
If you want to learn how we're both coaches and animal communicators, we can help you.
Well, it's funny because we talk about, you know, that we were both a bit moved when we got on, and for me it was, I'd had this wasn't stupid, but I had a gut reaction to an emotion that I knew was trivial. The circumstances were trivial. The emotion was anything but trivial. And then all the stories that go around that, and I meet with my friend Louise, who's also about embodying stuff, and I sort of tried to unpick it. And then I went to a garden centre and I bought myself some herbs, as you call it. Why do you call it herbs? I don't understand it. You don't say hospital. You don't say hotel. Why don't you say herbs?
Herbs. What do we say?
Herbs.
Herbs. What should we say?
Herbs.
Oh, you pronounce the H.
Why wouldn't you?
I don't know. I didn't create the English language, which I find absolutely limiting.
I'm sure the Germans pronounce the H. Anyway, I bought some herbs, and I'm going to plant them after we finish here. And then I went to see my mum, and my mum was all over me like a wet sock. She was being really sweet. My mother is not we call it a sook in Scottish. She's not like that. I mean, she's been a lot nicer. She says nice things instead of horrible things, but I don't know if it's because I was still like processing what had happened earlier. You know, this whole, because you go through the whole, why? I'm still reacting to this stuff. Oh my God, I'm 54 years old, and I'm still reacting to these emotions. Oh my God, I'm still getting angry with myself for reacting with these emotions. Oh my God, I'm still annoyed at myself for getting annoyed at myself for getting, you know, all that again. You know, and I'm sitting there with my mom, and she was being sweet, but she still had this little something about you're much nicer now than you. She just still manages to like get that in. Do you know what I mean? I was just thinking, you're the reason I'm in.
When we talked earlier, you said she said you're much better now.
Yeah.
But she said nicer. What did she say?
Well, she said both. She doesn't actually articulate it. What did she say exactly? She has said that when she was more. She has. The last time I saw her before COVID, before she went into home, even last time I saw her down south, I went to visit, and I was a lot calmer with her, and she responded a lot better than that. Didn't try and wind me up all the time. I can take some credit for that. But she had said, "You are much improved," is what she said to me. She actually patted me on the knee and said, "You are much improved," as if I should go, "Oh, thank you very much." You know, and I was just like, I'm not even going to ask you what you mean by that, because that way lies madness. She said she has said that, and then the last time I took her to the cafe, which was a few weeks ago, she had said, "This is really nice, isn't it? Because it wasn't always like this, was it?" You know, yeah, you know, here's a woman that can't fucking string a sentence together. Still manages to get a little dig in every now and then.
So this is what I was going to ask you earlier before we said, no, we're going to start the episode. So what if your mom was noticing all the progress that you've made, particularly around, okay, because here's, okay,
I've changed, she hasn't, I've changed, yeah.
Yeah, and she's noticing it for the better, like it's a compliment.
I know, but it doesn't feel like a compliment. I know, because she's basically saying, "I can't wind you up anymore, can I?" That's what she's saying.
Oh.
But no, she's not. That's what she means. Because whenever I was this horrible person, from my perspective, obviously, this horrible person would be because she would dig and poke and poke and poke until she got a reaction, and then I was a horrible person. And she can't do that anymore. I mean, she can't do it on two fronts. One, she's not able to, and B, that's a lie. I don't know that I wouldn't react. She is not able to anymore. But I'd like to think that the last time I saw her, as I say, before she went into home, so she was still a lot more able mentally. I didn't react. I was there for, I think 3-4 days, and she didn't get to me. Like, and and I, but yeah, and I know in her perspective, it's all my fault. All of it was all my fault forever. But it's just, I sit there with her, and and she's holding my hand, and every now and then she keeps leaning over to kiss me, and the sort of staff going, oh, she's sweet. And I'm thinking, she's not fucking sweet. Like, she's not fucking sweet. Like, she's not. I'm sorry. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are moments I look at her when she's looking frail and vulnerable. I can look at her and I can feel love for her. And then obviously I want her to be happy, and I'm happy that she's safe. But she's not some dear sweet old lady. But then maybe nobody is.
No, I don't know if anybody is. I have a theory, and I'm curious to see how it's going to play out with my mother, who was recently diagnosed with MCI, or mild cognitive impairment, which is a step on a path of Alzheimer's, depending on what she wants to do. Because she doesn't have short-term memory. So we saw them for dinner just before we went to Alaska, and I saw them this past weekend. So in both conversations, she couldn't remember that we were going to Alaska. Why were we going? She couldn't remember any of that. And then when we saw them, she couldn't remember that we had gone to Alaska. And she kept asking me, so have you traveled much? She kept saying that over and over, because I used to, for my job, my jobs in the past, I used to travel all over the world. So she's in this place where, anyway, so she keeps asking me the same questions again. But at the end of the dinner, before we went to Alaska, as we parted ways, she looked at me and said, I'm so proud of you.
Oh, I got goosebumps.
I know. And it took my breath away. Not that she hasn't said that in the past.
Oh, well done. Congratulations. I don't think my mother's ever said that to me.
My negative belief of not worthy started with her and my dad, but with her as maybe the not so positive influence, I'll say it that way. So for her to say it, and knowing that most likely she doesn't understand what I do for a living now.
No.
She's good at work instead of advertising. But for her to say that, it's almost like, I think my theory is that in these types of illnesses, these cognitive illnesses, dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever you may be, that there is filters drop and the divine comes through much easier. And so we still get triggered. However, what they're saying is actually, for lack of a better word, innocent, because they are just actually to some channeling, like, I am so proud of you, or Kate, you are much improved, or Kate, it wasn't always like this. And it's like realizing to some degree on their end, they may not realize what all happened and it's all gone and whatever, but in the moment they see you unconditionally, or see us unconditionally, and just express something.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I completely agree. And I do know that. And you know what, even when she was fully functioning, you could say that what she did was in innocence, because you just are who you are. I don't think she I don't think my mother has ever had the emotional capacity to understand the impact of anything that she's done to me. It just does not. There's an expression called social imagination, which is usually, they use it, for example, with people with autism and stuff like that, in that if you haven't actually experienced a situation, most of us, if someone came to you and said, my cat's just died, now you may have never had a cat, you may never have had a pet, but you have enough of understanding of seeing of how other people react that this is probably a sad thing. And that's almost like your social imagination. You are able to, extrapolate situations that you haven't come across before in order to understand how. My mother doesn't have that. It's that simple. That's what they say. If something hasn't happened to her, she has very limited understanding of how it feels. And so obviously she has experienced a lot of things, but I think there was a time in as I started opening up to learning about autism, because there's a lot of people I work with had Asperger's, but just in that general understanding of that, and then reading more about it and realizing that she doesn't have the capability. So when my mother says you are much improved, she literally means, I think you're a lot better. You know, because she has no understanding of, nor would she take any responsibility for her part in any of our relationship. Do you know what I mean? But she does say really nice things. She actually said, you look lovely, when they came in, which is nice, because normally my mother would greet me with, well, she doesn't swear, but she'd effectively, what the fuck do you look like? But she doesn't swear. You know, she was extremely critical of how I look and how fat I am, or you know, whether my hair's, you know, she was just constantly rude how I look. Where do you get all that from? Yeah. Anyway, enough about my mother. So
No.
yes, I agree.
Yes. And I think there's just so much here. There's so much as far as being a human being and the experiences that we have, that we signed up for when we were in Soul Farm, that we signed up for with all these other people, our mothers, our friends, our, you know, you and me, and all the things, right? And then I think it's going to be so interesting to read it against or up against or with informing. See, this is where language is limiting. This book that's arriving, like how
I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, you know, we still have, oh my gosh, there's just been so many books of late. There's so many books, so little time. But anyway, just to see how that kind of influences all of this too. I will share it, of course. So, as I tend to do in all my ramblings. But yeah. So I don't know, is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I do feel better. I feel much better than when we came
I feel
in.
much better. I always do when I've spoken to you. I don't think we've ever sat and struggled so much to come up with, because normally we're absolutely bursting with ideas, but I think we're both suffering from a bit of emotion fatigue, perhaps.
I feel like it. Yeah. I'm getting lots of messages to slow down again, even more. You told me last week that Lucas was waking me up in the middle of the night so I would feel fatigue in my body, which I did, and I slept 15 hours one day. He woke me up last night too, and it was like, anyway.
I bet once you resign, you'll sleep like a baby.
I bet he will too. I bet he will too. So we'll see. Stay tuned, everybody, for more escapades of being sensitive and human on Making Light, Two Humans Being.
Yeah, well, let's wrap it up then.
Right. So go ahead, Kate.
Well, thank you for listening, watching. Oh, we need to work out how to get this on podcast. I did have it on my list. It seems to have dropped off. I'll have another look at that. But yeah. Thank you for watching. I am Kate Foggo. This is Julie Hurt. Together we are Making Light, mostly Making Light. Sometimes we make other stuff as well.
Sometimes we make a little dark and then try to light it up. I don't know what we do.
We make a little, no, we always make a little light. Sometimes we make lots of light. Two Humans Being. You can follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on Instagram, you can subscribe right here. Just press the bell, I think it is, isn't it, or the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes. We try and do an episode every week. We would love that you share us with your friends and family if you enjoy us, because we would like to reach more people. Thank you very much, and see you next week.